So I like to start off my drawing with erasing the sketch with a kneaded eraser just enough so I can still see the lines, but at the same time for the lines not to show too much, so once I start blending the lines would slowly disappear. Then I like to start off with the eyes first. Now the eyes are always my guidance when it comes to the rest of the shading. So depending on the intensity of the shades in the eyes area, it will be much easier to determine the rest of the values on the face. Now I'm using the brush as my main tool for blending the graphite, but I also use blending stumps, cotton buds, and even the cotton wool depending on the area that I'm blending. But here I mostly use the brush for the face shading, as the brush can really help out in getting those smoother shades and transitions. Now what I like is to work on each part bit by bit, and then after a while I like to go back to those same areas again and improve the shading if needed. So I'm slowly covering the face bit by bit, and I mostly use the pencil first as my base layer, and then I go over using the brush to blend the same areas and to combine them and connect them slowly. Now again, I'm working here on the other eye, trying to get similar values like her right eye, going in with mostly 4B pencil to limit the most important areas of the eye and also to block in the darkest parts. Now again, I didn't want to finish it straight away, as I like to go back to the same parts after I built up some other parts of the face. So the most important thing first is to just block the certain parts, especially the darkest ones first, and then slowly build up the rest of the shades and then go back to the darkest parts to make them even darker if needed. For the face area, I mostly use 4B and 2B pencil, just so I could get the basic shades, and I like to build them up slowly and gradually, so whatever part of the face you're working on. So the best way is to work like in a couple of layers, just adding a very basic layer and then going a couple of times more, building it more properly through each and every layer. I also wanted to block the part where her lips will be, just so I could have an idea where her lips are starting and the rest of the face shading is, and also for the lines to slowly start disappearing as well, as we want to create this portrait as realistic as possible. And it's important to go every once in a while with your brush, just so you could have the best possible outcome when it comes to shading and the smoothness of the shades and transitions as well, because the graphite stays on your brush, which makes it such an awesome tool to combine and create smoother transition every time that you go over certain parts. When it comes to her lips, I went in again with my 4B to limit the darkest parts of her lips first, and then as you go, you can use the same technique as the one that we use for the face shading, which means that you need to take some time to build the values up slowly and gradually with a couple of layers, and not pressing your pencil hard at all at this point, but just using a light pressure to build up the desired shade. And it doesn't quite matter what pencil you use at this point, as long as you don't press your pencils hard. The same results can happen if you're using even the 8B pencil, but as long as you have the control over your shades, the results would pretty much be the same. It's also important to keep the balance between very dark shade and very light ones, as this is something that will make your drawing much more realistic as well. I'm also using the tiny blending stumps here, as the lips are quite smaller and we want to have a bit more control over our shades. So for the first couple of layers I used the brush, but then as I wanted to create some details, blending stumps are an awesome way to do so, as you will have a better control over smaller parts of the drawing. And here, as I said, we need a balance between the lights and darks, so I went in with a mono zero eraser so I could create some highlights and to make the lips look more realistic by adding some highlights to it. Now for the eyebrows, first we need to create a base layer just so we could connect the eyebrows with the rest of the face, meaning that once you start layering some tiny hairs to make the eyebrows as realistic as possible, we want to have that illusion of them going outside of the skin, so the base layer needs to be quite similar than the rest of the face shading. Also, here is so important to sharpen your pencil as much as possible, and also as you go you need to learn to rotate your pencil in your hand as frequent as possible, so you could always have that sharp tip to create those thin lines, and also so you wouldn't have to sharpen your pencil after each and every stroke. Now you just need to give yourself enough time to cover the eyebrow area properly, and once you do, you can blend it in In this case, I used the cotton bud. It seemed a nice tool to blend the eyebrows, as the blending stump would burnish and blend the values too much, so I used something that is smaller but could also give me much better results. And again, as I like to go back to certain areas, I wanted to add another layer in this part because I wanted to connect the eye area with the eyebrows even better. So I added another layer of graphite just so I could build this part even better. And as I added it, I went again using my brush, just trying to connect all the areas together. I used the same technique for the other eyebrow, just going in slowly with a pencil, then blending it again, and then finishing it off by adding another couple of layers using a pencil with a sharp tip. In case you're interested in working on this portrait, this reference will be uploaded on my Patreon page, so make sure to check it out. The link is going to be in the description down below. When it comes to the hat, I again layered basic layers and then blended in with a tissue. Then I wanted to create a bit of a wool effect using darker shades and mono zero eraser, but I also wanted to get a slight out of focus effect, so I didn't want to go too much into details here. I just wanted to add a bit of a details that would suggest that it's a wool hat. That's pretty much it. And in the end, I just added some very dark layers just so I could improve the look of it a bit more. So when it comes to the hair, I used a very similar approach that I use for the eyebrows, meaning that I sharpened my pencils as much as possible and then I started layering the shade slowly. But here, it's very important to follow the flow and the direction of the hair straight away, just so you could get the best results and that your hair would look as realistic as possible. I was using the darker pencils such as 5, 6B and even the 9B, especially for the hair on her left side, as that part was quite dark. And I also used the blending stumps and the cotton wool as well for blending the graphite as much as possible. Also, it's really important to work on the flyaway hairs as well here, as that can really contribute in getting realistic look of the hair. I used very similar approach like I used for her hat for this part, as I just wanted to get the basic shape of the jacket. I didn't want to get too much into details here, as I wanted to leave the main focus to her face. So I just used some basic shades here to create her jacket. Now, as I said, I used some very dark pencils here, such as 9B for this part of her hair, as this part is very dark. Also, by adding some darker values here will make her face stand out even more. We're going to create that depth that we need for a good drawing, so it's so important to follow the reference and add some very dark values wherever it's needed. And here you can see me adding some highlights with Uni Posca white gel pen, and also I left the eyelashes for the end. Here also is really important to sharpen your pencil and to follow the direction of each and every eyelash there. And for the end, I'm just adding some freckles using a 3B pencil and then burnishing it and connecting the freckles with the rest of the face by using blending stumps and some cotton buds. And this would be pretty much it for today's video. Kindly leave a comment if you find this video helpful. Hope you like this drawing, and I see you in another one soon. Bye guys.